All right. So, very, very quickly, we don't have a lot of time, but making games have been trying to understand how discovery elicits this ecstatic feeling of revelation. And now we can reproduce this ecstatic feeling by designing what I call the unknown. This led me to research the concept of travel, as in traveling, in terms of personality transformation and self-reflection. The compulsion to be elsewhere is a classic theme in the discourse around the motivations for travel. It is the ambivalence of Ulysses' travels when trying to return to Ithaca that was later immortalized by Dante in the Inferno, which is paired with the mundane fear of being stuck at home and being stuck with the responsibilities of being at home. And to this meaning, this is a beautiful poem by Bertolt Brecht that I recommend you read very quickly. If we reduce traveling to the thought processes that happen in the traveler during the act of travel, we can see how these thought processes are mediated by the means of travel and the places of travel. The way the scenery changes while we're traveling is interpreted through the traveler personality and through their background, their cultural background. And this filtering informs the thought processes that happen inside the traveler. This is something that I had the opportunity to research and explore in a game I made in 2013 called Mirror Moon EP, which is a game about traveling in space and visiting planets that has specifically no instructions, no explanation, and no explicit narrative. In that case, this is the spaceship that you use in Mirror Moon to travel. In this case, there was no established cultural background for the player. In fact, the game did not have any character. The whole concept of the game was to have the player herself be the explorer and the wanderer, and wondering what the implications are in a completely unknown and a completely unexplored world. This was mainly an aesthetic journey that was focused on eliciting existential questions. It was a very abstract idea of travel. And I wanted to move from that abstract travel to find ways to inspire player reflection on the motivations of travel in a human context, in a more realistic, in a grounded in reality context. And I wanted to know if it was possible to guide and observe the thought processes that happen in the game, in the player, through such travels, through this kind of travels. This is our main inspiration for the game I'm presenting today is Il Sorpasso by Dino Risi. It's called The Easy Life in English. So this approach to realistic travel is what eventually steered us in the direction of creating a narrative game, one that had a real-time component to travel. In other words, we wanted the narrative of the game to happen as the traveling was taking place and to simulate the thought processes not from a blank slate, but from a predefined, pre-authored, designed cultural background. It is not surprising that we picked the dialogue as a form to expose the dynamics of this context of traveling. Traveling with someone is, of course, an opportunity to talk about the motives and the destinations of travel. It can be even argued that each dialogue is a travel in and of itself. Of course, at the end of a dialogue, participants are different from when they started their dialogue. Travel and dialogue are, it can be argued, like metaphors of each other. They're mutual metaphors. And it is, of course, a very potent narrative and philosophical device. I'm talking about dialogue, that is rarely used in games in tandem with real-time progression of the events that surround the players. Normally, it's either dynamic dialogue that is not interactive in the way that The Last of Us does it, so stuff happens in the game and the characters comment on it without player interaction, or it's turn-based, like in the sense that the game stops and the player is asked to perform a choice, and then the story continues from that point. Instead, we wanted to do something different, and this is Wheels Warellis, the new game that we just released in beta version on the PC, and it's a narrative road trip set in the Italian 70s on the coastal road called the Via Aurelia. La
Si comincia con la danza, baili tu, canta il motore, baili tu, canta il motore. Superare tutti gli altri, superare il batticuore di una strada che è un cantiere, di un paese un tentatore. E le soste a lungomare, il motore ancora ascolta. Piatti pieni e mal serviti, piazze piene di dolore.
All right. The dialogue progresses in the game even without player interaction. You can see there is a timer that's like that black ribbon that is constantly progressing towards the auto-selection of the line of dialogue, and it's supposed to simulate the impossibility of non-communicating. So even if the player stays silent, after a while, the dialogue lines are selected automatically, in this case silence, and the other character changes topics accordingly, so they continue the conversation. The dialogue topics are determined by player action as well, meaning that the player conducts the story not just by picking dialogue options, but very much by picking where to go when the road branches, and by participating in gameplay events, if you will, such as running away from the police in this police car chase, or participating in illegal road races. And these are commented by the characters in the game in real time as they happen in the game. The topics are also generated and determined by the surroundings and the situation. Both the passengers and the player character can make remarks about the environment that can spark other conversation topics. For instance, when they drive by a monument, like in this case, they will comment and discuss its relevance to Italian history and contemporary Italian society. The dialogue, in turn, on the other end, informs the player of their surroundings, making them notice points of interest and their significance in terms of like opportunity to change the outcome of the game. Like in that case, they inform the player that they can stop and pick up a hitchhiker, or in the other example, the passenger tells the player that there is going to be a branch in the road that they can go to another city if they turn right. And it's like a diegetic form of tutorialization. Finally, and this is my last slide, I think it's interesting that this system can be used to inform the player about a different extraneous context. By making her choose between pre-existing lines, we give them the opportunity to interact in a credible, coherent way in an environment and with a culture that they might be completely unknown to them. So I think that's also an interesting side of it, and that was it.